I'm Drew Carter.
Microphones?
No. I'm Drew Carter. So we do not have a quorum tonight, but so we cannot actually have a real meeting per se, but you all are welcome if you want to come up right to the table, sit down, and we can talk. If you would rather address more of the board, you can wait for the next month, but that's a long ways out.
I can speak for myself at least. There's a group of us here that just have interest in.
Yeah, and again, I apologize, but if you could just kind of pull the mic down, because we do record all this stuff.
And identify yourself.
Identify yourself.
All right. Hi, I'm John Wyman, and there's a group of us here that are just interested in seeing where the town's at on the Airbnb issue, and that's why we're here this evening.
All right.
I'm Kelly Sullivan, as most of you know, and I'm just here out of curiosity.
Okay.
We have more chairs?
Do you want us to move back?
Would you like us to move back to the gallery?
A couple more people can pull up. So there's a few more spaces here.
Yeah, you can pull your
A
chair
couple more,
over.
bring a chair up.
Is this what happens when you're late? You get the old yucky chair?
You don't get the,
You're my neighbor.
huh?
I'm
For
my
those
neighbor.
of you just
Oh,
came
are
in,
you?
for those of you just came in, we have.
Oh, yeah, right down at the farmhouse.
No, not farmhouse, further down. Book club with Michelle.
Oh, yeah.
For those of you who just came in, we don't have a quorum of the board, the committee to hold a formal meeting. However, we can, so that all that means is we're not going to get into any of the other business that we would be normally talking about. But with everybody showing up, we don't want to waste the time. We want to hear your input and try to have a conversation back and forth of what we have looked at so far. And this is not an easy thing. And we have been looking to other places that have regulated some form or fashion to try to get Portsmouth, Laconia. We have a consultant right now for the master plan committee who's also aided Waterville Valley and Gorham in writing it. And one of the things she pointed out is each town has a little bit different focus on it. The Waterville Valley is probably more, wants to encourage it more than the Gorham Valley's a tourist town and that kind of thing. So that's what we want to hear your concerns and if you have any suggestions or
Input.
any inputs.
So I have a question. So is Alton for Airbnb or not?
When we speak, if I just ask if you could just announce your name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just so we know.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Elaine
Okay.
and I live on Coffin Brook
Okay.
and we have a rental above our garage.
Okay.
And I have had it on VRBO all summer.
Okay.
It's not attached to our house, has its own meter.
Right.
So is the town for,
Well, ultimately,
and we also have a home, we also have a property up at Alton Shores.
okay.
But in Alton Shores, we actually have full-time renter. But we pay the association for it. So our tenants do not have access to Bill's Pond or Sunset Lake.
Okay. Well, to ask if you're for or against it, ultimately, it's going to be you that are going to decide on how you want to manage it. Obviously, this is a tourist town and there are people that come here on vacation, and want to vacation here. I know I'm John Dever, I'm the code enforcement officer, I'm the code official, and the building inspector, the health officer, and the zoning officer. So that's how I ended up here with zoning amendments. They're very an important part of my job. Some of the concerns that I have with having these, and they're based on complaints that I get or comments that I get, is, someone moves in a residential neighborhood and then the house next door becomes an Airbnb and there's parties 52 weeks out of the year. Matter of fact, one of our zoning board members lives in a neighborhood where they actually created covenants to prevent that, to not allow the use of it in their neighborhood. So it's not gonna be an easy, like I said, an easy.
It is not.
to begin to go, but
I'm Paul LaRochelle. I'm a selectman's representative in this group as well. And how many of you are actually here for Airbnb or other issues?
I'm Airbnb, I'm for it. I mean, we call it VRBO because that's how we have it
Mhm,
listed.
yeah.
Short-term
I really
rentals
don't know.
is-
Short-term rental.
Yeah, I, you know, I
That's the
mean,
generic term.
thank you.
I'm
It's the
here
company.
for
Sure.
that. And
Yeah.
We're here, I'm here to hopefully learn a little bit about
Bit about where the town is at on it and more about what could be done for regulating it. So it just isn't rampant anywhere.
Mhm.
And I think Laconia is a good example where they, they've allowed it around Wares Beach in some areas. And they've also have waived some of that for a couple of cases.
Mhm.
So in other words, if it's, a gray area and somebody, comes and contests it and then the board could decide, hey, for or against that person saying, oh, yeah, you meet all the criteria, even though you were cut out of it. So, we're going to go ahead and prove it. And Laconia has done that. They've already waived a couple of them. So I think just, getting a sense of, how is it affecting the town and, where does it work and maybe where does it not work as well, I guess is kind of my concern.
So for tonight, what I had put together, and it actually just got passed out, was sort of a
Sorry.
cover sheet. So there's a list of items to discuss, and the items that are listed are things that I've pulled from local towns that already have ordinances in place for Airbnbs. So these are things that we were going to discuss and whether or not, do we like these things for Alt? Does it work for Alton? Does it not work for Alton? And so it's just it's not an all-inclusive list, but just some things that I gathered together and pulled from other existing ordinances, and Laconia was one of them.
And I think it's important too, that there may be certain areas of Alton that this short-term rental works better than others. And I think that's where the zoning aspect comes in as well.
Sure.
So, but trying to get our arms wrapped around, controlling to some degree this short-term rental, we don't want to squelch it. I mean, we are, we're a vacation area. So we can't wipe it right out, but it's, but we did have, some people in at the planning board meeting that were very concerned about the parties that are going on and people trespassing, the short-term renters coming in and trespassing on their dock and their property. And so there's got to be something done to hopefully help control that a little bit.
It's beginning stages of this for Alton because we've just started talking about this over the last few months as far as a committee. So the input from all of you would be very helpful.
So going back, I'm Elaine again, once again. So I think we've done it pretty properly through VRBO because we've got the 9% sales, the 9% tax that the state of New Hampshire requires. And we've done it, priced it relatively low because it's a single, it's just like a loft type. I mean, I've got pictures on my phone of it. And we did have one tenant say, how close are you to the road? Well, our driveway is 300 feet long. So we're on, almost 6 or how many acres, 6 acres? I don't know.
6.5.
So we're not, I live on the same road as.
Yeah. And you live there.
Right. we
So
live-
it's not like they're going to have all of a sudden 25 cars show up and a giant bonfire and fireworks and screaming and hollering.
You know what? It's got a full kitchen, full bath. We don't offer anything. We don't offer fire pit. We don't offer any outside. I mean, maybe that's rude, but we don't offer any outside activities. We tell them, Mount Major, Castle in the Clouds, we had people come up from Mass because they were seeing a concert at the pavilion. How close are you to the pavilion? Well, we're a good 30 minutes. I mean, we had tenants in it last weekend. We were in North Carolina. Our daughter was home. I never saw the people because they had to go back to New York. Hurricane. So, some people you see, some you don't.
I think it's important. My name's Kelly Sullivan. I think you'd be hard pressed to try to do away with any short-term rental because we are a vacation community historically. And I'm not one to tell somebody that they can't do something with their own property either. But I always try to kind of see everybody's point of view. For me, what I have seen, we do a lot of work up in the shores actually. So a longtime customer of ours sold their house to move in closer with their children. And that house became party zone this past summer, constant turnover of people. So now that's for neighbors. Now, I think that you do a great job because you kind of keep that down, but it's not just that, it's the septic systems that now have 20 people in there. Oh, no, only 6 of us are staying, but then all of their family comes up for the, a night or two, and that overdoes your septic system. Next thing you know, you have septic failure that's going into our lakes and streams, and that has a huge problem on, the sustainability of our community. So I think it's important to try to find that neutrality for everybody, because again, I'm not one to say, no, you can't do something with your property, but it's important because it affects everybody in the community. So.
Yeah, speaking of septic, we've only lived in Alton for 3 years. We just had both properties empty. And he goes, oh, we're gonna have to do
our house more often
often because we've got,
2,000 gallon.
But this, so for instance, this long-term client that sold their house, and long-term neighbors, we're talking 40 years, and all of a sudden turned into party zone, and literally 15, 18 people there. The septic is just,
it's all
not, and it is Alton Shores. So those septics especially are not equipped for that at all.
Our house is on Larry Drive.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Can I say something? Bill O'Brien.
Hey, Bill.
We spoke before. I'm at 117 Mount Major Highway. Paul knows exactly where we are. Yeah, I see your point. I really do. I have no problem. But you live there.
Yeah.
These people that are coming up do not live here. They are buying this property and they're bringing in people. And I have pictures after pictures after pictures. If you like, I can pass them down. I can't get out of my driveway at times. I have people all over my property. The septic system has never been upgraded. The people that lived there before had 3 people at maximum live in that house. We had 25 people in my backyard, or I should say that backyard. That septic system can't handle that.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't been swimming in the cove because of it. I just have this freaky feeling. And tonight, before I came, a woman wrote a and she rented up here. Her son is you can read that. Her son is a policeman in Wolfboro. And he was saying how bad it was getting in Wolfboro. And when he walked in that house, he said that house should be condemned. The septic system is just a complete wreck. No one cares.
Well, and there is that huge problem of people, it's one thing if you live there and you rent
Exactly.
out, and we are historically a
Yep.
vacation area. But then you have those people that are just buying property
Well,
to
that's-
solely rent out.
Yeah.
They don't have a vested interest in our community.
Well,
That's a problem.
well, this is what we're
They're
getting.
just worrying about money in their pocket. I want to make a buck too. I'm all for it. We're a hardworking blue collar family.
Sure.
We have a family business, but you have to have a vested interest in your community.
That's right.
You know what I mean? You can make money and be a decent person
I
and
was in
not just
business
worry
for
about making
45
money.
years and I had more awards for taking care of my customers. I'd like Vince to read the letter that this woman is renting right now. If you could read that.
You ready for this? I'm Vince Bober, and I live at 119 Mount Major Highway. And this property in question is one driveway separates us. And the woman that rented it was quite disappointed in how the property was presented to them. And says, to whom it may concern, last year we vacationed on the lake and stayed in Wolfboro. My son is a police officer there. We decided to stay in Alton Bay. We had visited Alton Bay last year on the pontoon boat we had rented. I fell in love with Alton Bay and 9 months ago found a listing on VRBO that seemed like a perfect fit. The house looked awesome on VRBO. It had a beautiful, well-kept backyard with a sandy beach, a dock to accommodate a pontoon boat, and very spacious living room and kitchen. We all looked at the site. We were so excited to find it and be staying in Alton Bay, such a quaint town and a perfect fit for all of us. When we pulled up the 115 Mount Major Highway,
Quite one here.
I think there's a mistype. Our jaws just dropped. The house did not look anything like the photos on VRBO. The sandy beach was pretty much a big sandbox. The house had one smoke detector on the first floor, and all the other rooms had wires coming from the ceiling. The stairs are rotted, the decks are not sturdy. We paid $4,700 from Saturday to Saturday, and we were very disappointed. It is a disservice to Alton Bay and their community to have people from out of town, but rental properties mislead people. It is such a nice little town, and people like them are going to give the town a bad name. Sincerely, Paula Church. And, I can give this to anybody that wants to put it in their records.
Thank you.
And she also sent me photographs inside, but that's really kind of off the point of tonight's meeting, I believe, what she said. But like she said, she was very disappointed. They pulled up and they saw Bill's house sitting in the back, said, boy, what a great place this is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
A
A little misleading.
And they were quite disappointed.
Yeah, that's why she came over to me.
Mhm.
I was in the yard and she came over and she says, boy, what a beautiful house you have. I says, yeah. I said, I've sold everything I own to come up there and live happily ever after. And I says, now at the pictures I've sent, every time we look out the yard, there's kids in the yard playing. One of the kids, I guess, stepped on a fish hook from the last people who were at this house, stepped on a fish hook. She spent her first night at the emergency room getting a fish hook out of the kids. So the people like you, I totally agree. I rented houses, I owned houses. But you're in it because you own the houses, you want to make a few dollars, but you're here. These people are not here.
So to, eliminate some of it, when we bought our Alton Shores house, 2017, we were looking in Guilford, Wolfboro and here, and we were looking at the higher price, and we bought that house as a way to move here, because we actually moved from California to here. So we bought that house, and we were fortunate, we had it on VRBO twice. We met the neighbor across the street. My husband texted her and said, hey, what's going on at the house? Is everything okay? And she goes, well, they've got kids and they've got this and we're like, oh, shit, sorry. We weren't prepared for that. And so we're like, oh my God, we're so sorry. So he was hauling our stuff from California. He showed up and he's like, oh my God, they left, pot in the refrigerator with mac and cheese in it. They left dishes in the sink, things that we would not do because we've rented plenty of homes. And we bought this home fully furnished. So it was a deal for us. And so we had two renters in there. We had another renter who scratched the hardwood floors. So we, took out their deposit and we fixed it, whatever. Two renters. From then on, off VRBO, we had people in there renting for 11 months. So we were fortunate. We moved here in 2018 in July. We lived in the house from July through September until we moved on Coffin Brook. And we've had renters in it since. So we've been pretty fortunate that way. But I know from our personal experience, whenever we've rented something, we've left it probably cleaner than.
Well, we do.
And that's a bummer because I didn't even know where those properties were.
The,
until I saw the pictures.
The police, the officer from Walton Bay, from Wolfboro, I was talking to him in the driveway, and he says that Wolfboro is having a major problem. He says they're responding and they don't want them. And they're finding, 19, 20-year-old kids passed out on the front lawn, throwing up. He says, we have to rush them to the hospital. He says, for alcohol poisoning. He says, who do we go after? He says, you can't go after the Airbnbs because they're not responsible for what happens afterwards.
Now, you're disrupting the neighborhood. You have obviously a health issue, life, issue with underage drinking, and you're taxing your community more by having.
That's exactly what he said.
By having first responders constantly out to these locations.
Yeah, no, this is exactly it. I mean, my neighbor behind me, which is Airbnb, I mean, you know, when I built the house, I guess 2 years ago, there was all people that we knew and we helped out each other. And what happened was behind me, she bought a house up behind me. Well, she wasn't happy that I built that house, Paul. So she just went nuts and she come on my property and she cut down trees on my property. Now, I'm a licensed arborist and I have been for 45 years. I used to testify in court about the value of trees. And when I said something to her, she says, "You have pictures of it?" And I said, "Well, no, Karen." She said, "Well, F you," and hung up the phone. And it's like every time we turn around, we got more people up in the back. That house rents 10 people. That's a residential house. The one in the front says
It's hard, and especially in the Bay, because that's where you're gonna be on a high rental.
Yeah, so I'm looking at, do I turn around and rent my house and move somewhere peaceful? I sure as hell didn't want to do that. You know, I mean, that's what's forcing it to me. I mean, the stress that you're under when you're looking out and you got people standing on the pontoon boat fishing.
So I think as community members that have a vested interest, it would be our responsibility, which is why we're all here, I would think, to try to come up
Right.
with some type of idea. Because the town is gonna be just as clueless as we are right now at this point of just trying to figure out where we stand. So how do we come to a, you know, like a neutral agreement? It's hard, you know, you can't say, no, you can't rent, but how do you put some stipulations on that and some regulations?
Some of the things I've seen, a permitting process of going through the building inspector, having the fire department actually do an inspection for fire alarms, furnaces, checking these things out, see if the homes are even feasible. That's step one, I would think. See if these homes are feasible to even have an Airbnb or other type of short-term rentals. Also having adequate parking. So they're not on the roads, they're not parking on the streets, they're not parking on neighbors' lawns, adequate parking.
Because that's huge.
A limit to how many people you have in your short-term rental. These are things, some of the people are packing in more people than they can hold.
Well, a
So-
big problem with the Airbnb specifically is even when they state it's good for 6 to 8 people. I mean, I think most of us, I would be respectful and have the allotted number of people there, but a lot of people are not.
Mhm.
They're only up for
They
short term.
come, oh yeah, there's only 6 of us staying tonight until, Friday rolls around and then Saturday rolls around and then all of a sudden everybody's up. Oh, but that was only for 2 nights. Yeah,
I
but 2
think-
nights out of the week and you had
I think you got to look at every property as an individual.
Right.
Everyone is its own unique situation, I believe. And again, I think it's important that we find out if a permitting process is the way to go. Inspection by the building inspector to see if the property is adequate. Fire, having a fire inspection. And again, like I said, adequate septic and water supply. And definitely with parking, because that's a lot of the people I hear is they're parking on somebody's neighbor's lawn, they're on the street, they're on the sidewalk, this type of thing. That's, in my opinion, that's where it has to begin, is to figure out exactly a form of way of regulating. And that's going to be hard.
Paul, I think that the long-term rental, people are more respectful. It's the ones that come in for the weekend, as you say, they come in for the weekend, and I look over and I got these 20-year-old guys carrying cases of beer through the yard. You're going to have a problem, but when they're in there for a long period of time, I've told people, if you want to come over on my property and fish, I give you my permission. But don't come unless you ask. And what happens is these people that come in for the weekend do not care. I mean, I was young once and someone had a ski house and the next thing you know, we had 15 people sleeping on the floor. We all brought sleeping bags. At 25 years old, you didn't care where you slept as long as you went skiing. So I think that's what we're dealing with.
I do have a question on the property that you showed the picture. That's all on the 11 there, right?
Yeah.
So there's no way you can find out who owns those homes?
Yeah, we know who owns it.
I know exactly who owns that.
Yeah, absolutely. He owns multiple.
But without any regulations.
And I can
Exactly.
tell you right now, my conversations with the owner, unless we hold his feet to the fire.
He's
got
already
that
said
house.
that.
He has that house listed for 18 people. It's on a lot. The lot itself is not a tenth of an acre.
Mhm.
It's a
listed
little
for
over-
18?
Huh?
What kind of septic does it have there?
Whatever's been there forever.
He's actually got it listed for 18.
Yeah. Holy
Because you
mackerel.
have bunk
Well,
bed, you can go
it's-
3 people
He
high.
bought it for his son.
Yeah.
And Bill sent me the ad,
Mhm.
you know, and so I know exactly which house he's
Yeah,
talking
John,
about.
you've seen it.
I talked to the owner, the guy that bought the house, and I said, you guys have that listed for 18 people. It's only 4 bedrooms in the whole house.
Mhm.
And sooner or later, your septic system's gonna pop out of the ground. And
Oh,
when
sure.
it does, no one's going in that house. That house is shut down completely. And he's like, okay, well, I'll say something, but I know it doesn't matter to him
No.
because
No,
they don't live there.
And that's the issue.
So ours is only listed for 4 people.
Yeah, well, see, this is it.
The average should be 4 to 6.
But I would say from this conversation, you're a responsible renter.
Right.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So.
We
Yeah, but-
try, and we've got it that you have to be 25 or older. But like,
Mhm.
again, I'm going through VRBO. I don't know Airbnb, so.
he's been thrown off Airbnb from what I understand.
Airbnb is a very good
Something
company, actually.
Yeah.
They actually do screening.
Yeah.
They do screening for the people that own the property and they do a credit check. They do all the checking. And that's why the people that have Airbnb pay a premium to have these people.
It
But
seems like we've gotten a lot of, how do I say this without higher educated people from Mass. We had someone from Pfizer, you know, Raytheon. I mean, we're getting, you know.
quality people.
We've been
Yeah,
fortunate.
we've been-
Probably, oh, yeah.
And we're very fortunate, and we do, every time someone leaves, we're like, oh my God, is the apartment a mess? Did they do something? Did they break something? You know, we're just,
Well, I think naturally with the stipulations that you put on your rental
Yeah.
yourself, you're gonna shoot towards say an older client.
Yeah.
Whereas 20 and 30-year-olds
No,
are
you're
not
right.
looking for that. They're looking for something on the side of the lake or down in the bay or, you know, that's got it
I wouldn't
all. and
want
they can-
someone 20 years old.
Right.
And we just sent our son to college and I don't know
Right.
we don't know what he's gonna do, so.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
So we have a house on Naughton Lane and we do just occasional rentals, just to kind of bridge the gap and pay some of the taxes and offset some of the expenses, because we do want to be part of this community. I think the majority of people that I know that are Airbnb owners are just that. We want to be part of the community. We're not here all the time. We pay the same tax rate as everybody else. We don't have any children in the school system. We don't get mail delivery. We don't get snow removal. We don't have, you know, in all fairness, like what you're talking about, in some of these incidents, for instance, it could happen with your neighbors. They could have 20 people over. Like, I think putting too much blame, you know, if you're not responsible, you're talking about bad business. And for those people that are responsible, I would hate to see all the people that are responsible, which I think is the majority of Airbnb users, or people that rent through Airbnb, which I do. I'm not a fan of VRBO. I like Airbnb better because you can screen better. If they show up and they're not who they say they're gonna be, they're out.
They're out.
It says it, you can add contracts to it. It is it pays all of the taxes. It is, you have their credit card, you have their name. I have more information on the people that are staying at my house than Uncle Joe and Aunt Martha that are visiting next door. So I just think a lot of this is just examples of like people that are irresponsible, but I don't think that that's like the Airbnb community in general. I think I had a meeting with someone here not too long ago, but they said that 80% of the people in this town are second homeowners. So, I mean, we're a big part of the community and I don't want 25 people in my house. I mean, I want to hear, so rather than making it more difficult and more expensive for all of us that are trying to bridge the gap, perhaps there should be a system where you find the people that are being irresponsible. If you get police calls to your house, then they're renters, and maybe something like that, as opposed to adding an additional tax for those of us that are trying to be responsible and just bridge that gap.
Right, and in each of the towns, then in, you know, what we briefly have discussed is a permitting process. So that by, you know, you decide that you want to offer your house on Airbnb and there's a permitting process, and the permitting process looks at parking, it's at safety, at septic capacity, at those things. And you granted a permit, however we do it, whether you actually have to go to the planning board or the zoning board, or it's done in a little less formal fashion. But at that point, you have a contract with the town. And you have, it's the same as going to the zoning board or planning board. When you get your decision, you have established a contract with the town. You have to live up to your end of the contract. And if you violate the contract, then the permissions can be removed. And that's, and I don't mean to sound like I'm, when I hammer it, because I don't. But I live in Meredith. At the end of my little road, I go right onto Waukee Street. And there's a house there that was built 7 or 8 years ago. The owner doesn't live there. The owner is someplace else. And that is a short-term rental. I don't know how they rent it out, but I know that it can't be any more than a 4-bedroom colonial. It's a fairly small colonial. And I know I've been there and counted 25 cars in the yard, on any given weekend. And so that's the problem. That becomes the biggest part, probably the biggest part of the problem that I hear over and over again, is they end up with too many people in the space, in the wrong neighborhood, or in an inappropriate place, and so we would have to look at, what's the septic capacity and how many people will that really tolerate?
And then come to a mutual agreement.
agreement,
That, it's gonna be 6 people, it's gonna be 8 people, is gonna be the max.
Depending on the size of the septic and the size of the living space, as far as bedrooms.
And that would take a conversation, probably my first person I would call DES, the people that approve septic systems and look at the designs and have all the calculations and everything, to try to get an idea what they think. Okay, we got a 3-bedroom system in the ground here. How many bodies can we put in the building?
See that requires you having to monitor it. Like, if I got an approval for, like, my septic says 6-person, like, I don't want my septic to fail anymore. Like, if it fails, I can't rent it. If it fails, I have to pay for it to be replaced. No one that owns a home here wants that. So my thought is more than just, what do you do if you get a permit and there's 25 cars there? Like,
then
Now it can be regulated.
How do you enforce it?
I guess how do you enforce
Well, how do you-
it? Because it
okay,
seems to me there should be
part of it would be-
penalty phase for the bad ones, which are far and few between that are bad. I mean, a lot of them you probably don't even know are Airbnb rentals, and they just do it occasionally,
right,
like we do. But I'm just saying, it seems to be adding a lot of expense for the town to be able to have to go out and do all of this and everything that happens. And you'd still have to monitor it after the fact, as opposed to a penalty where if you're not a responsible Airbnb owner and you do get police calls or you do get neighbor complaints, then you get called in and there's a penalty or a,
As a place to say that I see the point of
everyone.
view.
Yeah.
And that I agree with that to a point, because I know dozens of people that have Airbnbs that are occasional, that are not, and they're responsible. And it's not, and again, I'm just a citizen. I'm just here with everybody else. I just try to see everybody's perspective.
Right.
It's not coming, I don't think it's the town looking to, bring any undue, issues to, current Airbnbs. It's really just, I think, seeing historically being a rental vacation area. And it's primarily like it's gearing up that way. A lot of outside people that don't have occasional renters, but are renting all the time, and that's all it's just their money house.
Yep.
They don't have a vested interest in the community. They don't care if their septic fails. They're just going to replace it because they have, 20 more rentals coming up. And I think that's what the town is trying to limit.
And there's
going
a little of both.
forward, right? So
Yeah.
you have to worry
There's a
about
little of
now,
both.
you have to worry about, what is coming in the future. And that seems to be happening a lot more, unfortunately.
Excuse
But
me.
because of that, it kind of affects everybody.
Yes, excuse me. My name is Scott Griffith. I'm a resident of High Point Drive. And I'm here with 3 of my residents, Larry, John, and Mark. And I agree with your point. We're in a very nice neighborhood, and the house right next to me was just sold, and a real estate investor bought it from Florida. And he's got it on Airbnb, VRBO.
Yep.
There's cars from Connecticut, New York, constant change of people. And that's our concern. That's why we're here.
This picture shows it. I mean,
Right.
this property is only supposed to have 2 cars in the driveway.
I drove by that property the
Two
other day.
cars.
The minute I saw that picture, I went, wow, I drove by that property
Seen
the
it.
other day. and went, wow,
I
there's a lot of
had-
cars there.
I had to constantly call them to move the cars. And this was in the winter. And Paul, you know my driveway.
I know
It's
your
got a-
driveway.
Got a slope to it. And I went up and I knocked on the door for about the 3rd time and I said to the guy, not for nothing, buddy. Could you give me a little room here? Give me a break. He says, that's not my car. That's my daughter's. I don't really care whose car it is. You're blocking my driveway. I'm trying to meet someone for dinner. Now I have to wait for you to go get dressed to move your car. So this is the situation. I mean, you got 8 cars. parked.
That's the
response-
problem.
In response to your question about monitoring, whatever, honestly, if we don't increase the staff at all, it would be a complaint based. I probably would never have a complaint about your operation or the other people that you know. And I know people that do. They move out for the summer and rent it, and then that helps pay the mortgage for the rest of the year. But it would be a complaint based thing, or in this case, I know that house is supposed to have no more than 8 people in it, and I go by and see 10 cars or over, there's a problem. And at that point is when you have that discussion with the owner who had the permit holder, if you will, and I don't think it would be much of a stretch to have a database that's accessible so that you could see who has a permit and what their limits are for that. But a lot of it is going to be complaint based. People call and say, hey, look, I know this guy's an Airbnb guy and he's only supposed to have 8 people in the house and there are 15 cars here and they're hooting and hollering. And then it becomes an enforcement issue.
Well, and not only that, the enforcement part or the permitting process would also stop some of that, not allowing people to have 18 people.
Right, and
15
we
people.
would
The
have-
permit says and states for your specific property, you are allowed 6, you are allowed 4. So-
But in all fairness too, the monitoring, I think, is we're flipping that burden by this contract with the town back onto the homeowner, right? So it really is their responsibility. It's their home.
That's
That
right.
they need to make sure that the renters aren't abusing whatever the agreement is that they've made with those renters as well. And so there's what I'm hearing is that there's some people are like really, saying, we got to stop it, but I think this short-term rental is going to be, it's a necessary evil. It's the bad eggs out there that are forcing us to look at this and create regulation. And unfortunately, that's all we can do is create regulation. But we want to do it in such a fair manner that it doesn't hurt anybody who's currently got an operation or who's going to have an operation responsibly. So what I'm hearing is, is taking a look at a permit application and creating an application. It's going to identify septic size, which will help define the occupancy.
Yep.
The parking, which will also help define occupancy to some degree. One of the things that was talked about was inspections, and I almost think that a fire department inspection,
That's what I was saying.
semi-annually, something is going to be a little more frequent. These pictures, at some
Furnace,
point here, that
smoke
house passes
detectors,
inspection.
Wiring.
The business, usually the fire department comes in and inspects. So
Yeah.
often you have to make sure you have your.
All your smoke detectors,
Yeah.
all your smoke detectors are working, all your outlets are
Right.
working correctly.
But clearly that house had smoke detectors probably working at one point,
And they
but
were
with
pulled
them
off.
yanked out and gone, and it's.
Those look like they were just battery operated. They weren't hardwired.
When I owned
Just took them
When I
off.
owned my nursery supply center, I had to have the fire marshal come in once a year. All the doors had to swing out. They had to have access to the upstairs, the what do you call it? The smoke detectors had to go, they had to be hardwired. So I had to spend a lot of money. I built the log cabin. You ought to try hardwiring a log cabin. So what we had to do is we had to meet the code. you know, so I mean, this is what I'm looking at
Have a
is,
small used car dealership before we came out, and they came out every year and inspected everything that we had.
Yep.
Walked around the building, made
Yep.
sure everything was okay and up to code.
Yeah,
And
fire
if you have
extinguishers
and
and
if you have a rental that is turning over quite frequently, I think it's important, especially from the fire
Mhm.
perspective, especially in this town with the history of fire that we do have. that it
That's
is
for sure.
important. So I don't think, again, so what I'm taking away is the town doesn't want to do anything to people that are okay and responsible, but we need to have regulations. So when people do have a complaint.
Right.
come at them.
we've got something to stand on, so.
That's
You gotta look
exactly
at
it.
both
Yeah.
sides of the spectrum too. And you made a comment of short-term rentals.
yeah, Paul,
And
can I
it-
finish that? What you're talking on the short-term rental flows, we have those girls that are aside of us that have those cabins. They rely on that short-term rental,
Mhm.
the weekend rental.
Mhm.
I mean, you've got a lot of these hotels that want that 2-day rental. There's where our problem lies.
Sure.
Is the people come up Friday night and it's party.
Mhm.
And I mean,
That is
I've
an
worked
issue.
hard all my life and I get up in the morning very early and go to bed very early.
But unless you have a, like,
Hmm?
I would say, a business investment in the town to have a new Oakbrook Gin or whatever
Right.
it is you have nowhere for people that want to come up and stay for the weekend. I think that's a shoe, and you have some money you want to put in for a business, you can't go wrong, open a small hotel in the town of Alton. But until that happens, this is where we're at.
If the zoning is there. You know, if
I've
these
seen-
places are zoned for residential, how can they be commercial?
And that's another thing that we have to look at is where,
Mhm.
you know, how do we manage this?
Right.
You know, because we don't want to say none in the rural zone because then they're out of business.
Right, right.
You know, but we don't want to say only in the residential commercial zone, which actually runs right up. That left side is residential commercially
Right,
zoned
right.
up to Sandy Point.
Exactly.
You know, so
It really has to,
that's another thing is where
property's unique.
the people do it responsibly, fine. You know, it's just that when the landlords are absent and never see the
Mhm.
tenants
Yep.
and really don't care, you know, as long as they get there.
Basically, we're
there's-
having this
there's-
conversation because for people like you that have a huge complaint, a rightful
Right,
complaint,
and that's a rightful
but there's
complaint.
nothing that the town can do
Yeah.
because there was zero regulation.
That's something that should not be happening. And then that's why we're all here.
Yeah.
And
No,
that shouldn't be
I
happening.
appreciate you
But we-
listening.
But we also have to remember there is, you know, when we talk about short-term rental, yeah, there are people coming in and out. But we talked about for a minute, long-term, or for someone's renting a property for a year or so. Sometimes that can be problematic. That sometimes the property, I've looked at both sides of the spectrum. Can't get the person out, the apartment's destroyed. They got cars and it's sitting out that are on blocks. They're working on their cars out in the street. They're doing this and that. And there's no, you can't get those people out. And you have a hard time getting them out. With short-term rental, it's cleaned thoroughly and has to be cleaned thoroughly in between each and every week. It's supposed to be.
Well,
That's
this
what
lady-
needs to be done. They need to be completely cleaned. And if they're running on Airbnb, that's why they got dropped.
Well, this is what I'm saying. This woman, she was beside herself. She said, I pulled up the rug and brought the rug out and cleaned it. She said it was disgusting.
Mhm.
She said that place is disgusting. And she moved in on Saturday, I guess it was, and the house cleaner came Sunday night. She said, I heard a vacuum cleaner going. She says, and we went upstairs and here's the woman in there cleaning Sunday night. And she's pretty immaculate. And she was like,
So
Really?
We are the housekeepers in our house, just so you have property, just so you know. And we do have
That's
you.
Responsible.
I hate
The whole
cleaning the
thing.
house. I admit it.
Mhm.
He has taken over and done a phenomenal job. I do the bathroom. He does all the bedroom. It works. I do the kitchen. It works. The floors, because it's we put in different flooring. So we have, our people cannot check in till 3 o'clock on whatever day. But the problem is they're all coming from Mass, Connecticut,
Mhm.
New York, New Jersey. They're not getting there till 6, 8 o'clock at night. And they have to be out by 11. So we have that time, as you said, to clean, because we're in there cleaning everything with Clorox wipes and whatever, just to make sure everything is clean. And I mean,
Correct.
not to get political, but I mean, our whole family is vaccinated and I don't want to put that on my listing, you know, are you because I don't know how people feel. So but
That's not at this meeting.
no, I know. I'm just saying for our own personal property, that's how, you know, we're like, "Oh, do you do it or not?" But anyway, so we do keep it clean. And as for parking, like I said, our driveway is 300 feet long. We got to use our garage.
Not an
My
issue.
car is always in the garage. During the winter, his trucks, we've never rented it in the winter, so we haven't had to do it, but we're responsible and we are out in the woods, so.
So if I can make a quick comment, please. It sounds to me like with the permit process, it's going to put the Airbnb folks on the radar. It sounds like the responsible Airbnb people, the RBO people aren't going to have any issues. If there's some sort of, like the other towns around us have done, penalties, you know, like a 1, 2, 3 strike kind of a thing.
Right.
It's an X amount of dollar fine for the first offense and so on and so forth until maybe the third offense where they, you know, pull the permit. So, it's, you know, for a year or whatever it is, and then a year later they can reapply again. So at least that would comb out some of the properties that are maybe problem properties, or maybe help them straighten their business out. To me, that sounds like a minimum step that could be taken for the town to just try to put some sort of a control, puts them on the radar. Right now, I don't know if the town knows who's doing what.
No.
You know, so who knows how many people are staying at a house if it's, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And you know, you also have to be concerned too. There's going to be people that are they're going to fly under the radar.
Sure.
And so.
And that's okay, unless they're having a party with 20 people and then their neighbor calls and then they're on the radar.
They're on the radar.
What
Then they're
about the
tagged.
9%? What about the 9% tax that we're paying to the state of New Hampshire?
If they're doing short-term rentals, they're supposed to be paying that.
No,
They are.
When
That's
I
what she's
signed up
saying.
on VRBO.
I know.
Yeah, I've got the 9% on there and then VRBO takes their percent. So how does the town of Alton, do they get that? Who gets that 9%?
State.
of New Hampshire?
State still does.
Yeah.
Okay.
To the tune of $120 million a year. That's about what they collect from Airbnbs in the state of New Hampshire, about
Wow.
$120 million a year, I think.
So no wonder they're dancing around regulation so much.
The state legislatures are trying to get it so that the towns can't put in their own.
Right,
restrictions.
that's been,
So I'm not paying the
Well,
town, I'm paying the
proposed.
state.
Oh, yeah.
right, yes,
Absolutely.
that's been proposed, but hasn't.
Except for your
so far
state, for your town tax.
successful.
That's a logic.
Your town tax on the
It's
property.
still out there, and it's something
Yeah,
that.
they try
Motel,
every year.
hotel, Holiday
Every
Inn goes to the
Mhm.
state.
Yeah,
But these people are going to the local restaurants, they're shopping in the local, they're shopping at the local stores.
Yep, they are.
They're
It's a-
eating at Gunstock, they're, you know, we are bringing some economic.
oh, that's,
benefit.
no, it's
Yes, yes,
absolutely.
It's
yes,
a
they
vital
are.
part of the community. I don't think anybody's
When we talk
contesting.
about-
that.
yeah,
Right.
When we talk about like regulating it, like, I don't have a problem other than, you know, most of us are doing this to help offset the taxes. I just don't want to see another tax involved in this. And we're in quirky little cottages, you know what I mean? I just would hope that the standard would be similar to that, as, you know, the apartment buildings that are being rented in town. I'm sure a lot of them might not pass, you know, the appropriate standards. I just wouldn't make it so laborious that we can't just do what we were trying to do.
No, that's,
And
That's not the intent.
a lot of the things that we're talking about, just in the defense of the Airbnbs, it sounds like this is a crappy neighbor. You're probably glad that they're
big
not
time.
here all the time, like, things you're talking about, these neighbors that live there could do that too. You know, they do violate the parking. I mean, my street, I've been in Alton for 10 years, our street's been closed off for construction for 7 of the 10. Like, it's, you know, it's give and take. I get it. Like, this is a growing community. I support all of my neighbors' activities, and I just would hope that it just doesn't turn into like, I mean, so those.
I don't really think the town wants it to. I think it's one more thing that they don't want to have to do, honestly.
Right.
If I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
Because like, why? You know what I mean? They have enough to regulate,
Right.
honestly. They don't want to put anybody out, but we have to, as a
It's a
community, we
protect the
have to
community.
To protect the community.
because it looks like it's kind of getting maybe a little out of control. So just trying to set some pre-regulation to that, not wanting to step on anybody's toes. I would like it to work for everybody because that's just the type of person I am. That's why I came tonight. I have no vested interest per se.
Yeah, I guess my point is just that in the summertime, like all of the houses in Alton are over capacity. I don't want, it's less capacity with
It's
people
really,
renting.
again, it's
than it is
really
with
more
me at
about
home because
when
I don't-
Mr. O'Brien has a complaint because he's got 25 kids in there partying.
Right.
That the town can actually do something about it. Because right
That's
now,
just,
there's nothing
that's
they
not
can do.
tolerable.
But we do, I mean, and you wouldn't want to be that neighbor. I would not want to have to be next to that building. So I certainly would want some type of regulation in place. So when I do call
Mhm.
the town and say, listen, and I think we're all like a little, it's not, if it happens once or twice occasionally, that's one thing.
Right.
But like a constant, that's not cool. And
I'd
you
It's
need
every-
to-
it's every week.
I'd be calling
It's
the
got-
cops.
Yeah, well, the cops won't do anything. It's not their problem.
Can't
They-
They can't.
No, they're
Unless you're
not.
breaking the law,
Just,
which is why-
just noise, they,
Yeah.
no, for they can
We've
do
called
noise, but
twice. And the sad part about it, like I said, I've worked my fingers to the bone to come here. We built a nice house with a deck
The
on it.
greenhouse?
Yes.
Okay.
My wife don't want to come out on that deck
Oh.
because the people sitting next door are like this, like we're staring at them.
So.
So you've put me in a fishbowl.
Well, the rentals in that area, some of them are a little less desirable, so I'm actually surprised people do rent them.
$4,700.
Anybody would, that,
Not to be rude.
we have to take a perspective check too, and I'm gonna use the real estate market at the moment. The prices that are being paid for property, the people that are paying, to me, $400,000 for a 2-bedroom, 1,200 square foot ranch on a 1/4 acre land, I would never do it.
Insane.
outrageous.
But you came from California,
Southern California, I grew up in Anaheim where Disneyland
but
is.
I mean, coming from places where that is a $600,000 property
Exactly.
Or more.
lucky,
Yeah.
makes it so that people are like, well, this is a great deal,
It's
and
also,
so if they get it for, even if they bought that place for 200,000, which I'm pretty sure is definitely not worth.
There was 280.
Yeah, and so, but they're gonna turn that money over. They're just looking at turning it over.
And they're getting how much on that?
280 they paid for that property.
Yeah, but what are they renting it for, did you say?
4,700 a week.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
another,
Oh, absolutely.
that's part of.
That's
and I
part
don't
of it.
know
Do the
if it's all over
math.
that, but-
Doesn't take long to pay it off.
So,
That's a 12-month
one
return.
of the problems that the communities are having, not just in Alton, but all around the resort areas and from the Lakes region up to the North Country,
Mhm.
is that people are coming from out of state. They're overpaying for these homes, just like you're saying, because they're not going to dwell in them. They're going to make money in them, so they can afford to do that. And what that'll do is that'll take away the opportunity for
That's
young
right.
families to
It
get
does.
into these homes that
Right.
live
Mhm.
and care about the community, and they're just getting outbid, and they're really they're struggling. And this is a real thing, and it's a problem that's going
And
on.
then
It
that
is
becomes
all-
a
in a lot of
dollar
towns.
cents versus a community. Like, I want to live in a community. I don't want to just live in a boarding house or what,
Yeah, right,
like, for
right.
lack of a better, but just to kind of give it.
And we know that this area, it's vital to have short-term rentals. It's vital. It's a part of this area is about. Any resort area, it's a big part of it. But without regulation, we've also seen, the troubles that can come from it.
I can give you 2 examples of that. One is Block Island, Rhode Island. There's no more residents in Block Island that come from Rhode Island. Another one now, what's happening is Jamestown, which is I should say it's abutting, right next to Newport. There's people that grew up there had to leave that island because what was happening was everybody was coming in and buying these houses and they were tearing them down and building these $1 million houses. So the people that are living there can't afford it because now what's happening is they're paying more money for the police department, more money for their fire department, more money for their schooling. Everything just went out of control. And the people in Jamestown, I was talking to one the other night, he's got to get out. He said, Billy, I'm on a fixed income. He said, I can't afford to live in Jamestown anymore. Block Island, you can go out there and there isn't anybody from Rhode Island anymore. And I grew up playing around on Block Island, surfing out there.
And I
People that
think
own houses up there had to sell them.
I think that's a very good point you make, because then you
This
lose
is happening.
some sense of community.
Right.
And we don't live in Alton right now. We all have vested interest, whether we rent or you don't. We all have a vested interest in our community. We like our community. It will grow because progress happens.
what.
But how do we try to, control that a little bit? It's important.
Intelligently managed.
Intelligently
It's
managed,
important.
yeah.
We don't want to people say, oh, we can't go to Alton because then they can get a permit. No, it's,
And when you make those plans, you have to actually plan ahead, just like you would your budget, right, for your month or the year or whatever. The town grows exponentially, month, year, years, so you have to, when you're making these regulations and thinking of things, you have to make them for now, but also consider the near future, the future, think about how that would change and go as the years pass.
Housing is growing, businesses are growing, people are coming in fast, people are moving out of
Everything, whether we rent or don't, we all live here.
cities, and they're moving in. We've noticed a big difference of this whole year of people coming in. John, you can attest to this, the building permits that have come in have tripled, quadrupled from what they normally are. People on the go, they're on the move. They're coming
to
up.
give you an idea of how this has grown. I've been here 11 years as the building inspector, and we average between 20 and 24 new house starts annually, which is a good number for a lot of towns. There's a lot of towns, when I first got here in 2009, 2010, there were towns that were having no new construction in a year because of the downturn in the economy or whatever. And then there are other towns that, their taxes are high, so people don't want to build there. But last year, from the first of the year to the 1st of July, we had 13 new house permits. From the 1st of July to the end of the year, we had 41.
Wow.
That's COVID.
I am now at 40
Exactly what I'm saying.
as of this week for the year, 40 new house permits. That doesn't count everything else, but so the people are coming here, and these new places they're building, the people are going to live in them. That's their home or their second home, however it is, but it's still, we're growing. We don't have a choice.
We have no choice.
Our taxes are great. And although I live in Meredith, I think sometimes I spend more time here in Alton. So, it's
probably do.
part of it. And so to me, it's my community also, and so it's desirable because the taxes are very good here. Our physical location to everything is great. Meredith is not as well physically located as Alton is. You can get to the center part of the state, you can get to the seacoast, you can get up the coast, the mountains. And so it's a desirable place to be, and it's showing. People are coming here. And then there are some people that are just spending an ungodly amount of money and never setting foot in the state and doing whatever. But we don't have it. We are growing.
Right, and the planning department sees the same thing.
Yeah, you're seeing developments. We're seeing things that we haven't seen for years.
I've seen a big difference. I've lived in town for 21 years, and it has exploded in the last 5 years. I've seen a big difference of what's been. It was always average building, average reconstruction, average remodeling. I'm more in the remodeling aspect of it. There's more new construction going on. The remodeling is still going on, but everybody that they can tear something down and rebuild, they are, or developing or buying property. And a lot of them, all of them almost are out of state. So
yeah.
This is what's happening, and businesses will come in, that we're going to grow, and we have to embrace it. We have to do it intelligently, and work together.
Progress happens, right? So I can look at, I'm originally from the South Shore. I've been up here 17 years, and I'm from a relatively small town, not unlike Alton, a little bit more populated, about half hour south of Braintree, and very desirable area. And it has grown exponentially. So it's still a beautiful town, and the town maintains itself very well. Cobblestone walks, the downtown area is very nice. They take pride in it. It's a historic district. But the population has definitely gone up and surged. And like Five Corners, when I remember when Shaw's came into town when I was a kid, and I mean, Five Corners, you can't even drive through there now. It's insane. So people from the cities generally try to go out to the suburbs, right? And then the suburbs then you kind of go out a little bit further, and that just happens over all of time. That's what happens. I think with COVID, it happened way quicker. It came in a rush as opposed to, filtering in a little bit at a time. And then people they're spending money like crazy for whatever reason. And then we have a lot of people that are moving here, but then we do have a lot of people that are just investing. And it's one thing if you're investing in your community, but a lot of people are not.
I noticed
So we need
that-
to learn to keep our community as a community while trying to grow.
That's our concern,
Mhm.
is we live at High Point Drive,
Mhm.
and it's a newer neighborhood. It's a
Right.
high-end neighborhood.
Beautiful.
And everyone that lives there has a single family, and the way the covenants were written by Brad Jones Senior, God rest his soul, he didn't realize there was going to be a VRBO or any rental, short-term rental, and he designed it within the covenants, single family use only. And it's a verbiage thing that may be misinterpreted. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, the neighbor next to me just sold this house for 600 grand, which is low end in our neighborhood, very low end. And a real estate developer, a real estate investor bought it out of Florida and for the sole purpose of renting. And there's an issue there with depreciation of our property and, other concerns of people coming in constantly just.
Well, the same concerns that have, I think, been heard, not just here tonight, but
Routinely everywhere.
Routine,
yeah,
it's
around the
a
state,
problem.
around the resort areas in our state. It's been a problem. And that's why these other towns have already reacted.
Mhm.
And those are towns that count on short-term rentals too.
Mhm.
And it's a fine line. And I don't think that the responsible, Airbnb hosts are really the big problem. I think, it's just a matter of, I think Laconia, limited it to a certain area, and then they granted waivers to people that, they felt were, one of the ways that Laconia stated it was, if it was just as much in the interest of the community as it was for the host or for the owner, then that was something that they considered. In other words, if it's just in the interest of as far as a waiver goes, then, that was one of the criteria that they had, the people had to meet to get a waiver.
They had the zoning, in zoning world, we call it substantial justice. Does the benefit to the individual outweigh the detriment to the town or vice versa? What's the harm if you put an extra, your house goes 2 feet in the setback when there's, that it's that type of thing. That's exactly what you're talking about. What's the balance there? What's the gain? What's the loss? Is there, or what would it be, or is it too much? Is it too much to expect that on a small dead end street with small single family houses, the guy at the end rents it out every weekend and there's 15, 20 cars in the cul-de-sac, whatever. That's the balance that we have to achieve.
I do think it's important to remember going forward with anything though, is that whether you rent or you don't rent and however you feel about it, is that as long as it's not just a real estate investor, but people that are doing it right, we are all neighbors, right? So we need to find a happy medium that will serve best for the community, but being respectful of each other too, right? Because we kind of lose that a little bit today, so.
One of the things that would be very helpful is actually notifying all the butters. So they're not just automatically doing, and you don't even know anything about it. All of a sudden you start seeing people pop up from out of state and
That would
everything.
be
Part of
my
it.
input is that would definitely be part of the process, that the abutters.
Notifying all the
know
abutters.
What's going on.
And
And then you would have a
some of the
chance to
towns
speak
have-
yay or nay on it.
Yeah, that, I don't think it'd be fair for someone to come in and for us to issue a permit and then the butters had know nothing about it. They're the ones that are impacted the most.
Right.
The gentleman that bought the house I referred to is already talking about, it's an unfinished basement, it's large. And he's already talking about putting additional bedrooms down there. So, that sort of can be concerning to the whole
There's
street.
no regulating.
Yeah.
Well, there's regulation
Based
for
on
the
its size.
bedrooms.
As far as the
That would
building
run
code,
through the
that
building
goes-
department and code.
As a homeowner, but then he's gonna pack it full of people.
Right.
So he gets his bedrooms approved, but you know what I mean? It's almost like,
Well, that's why.
it's a residential business kind of crossover thing.
Right, and this is just, and this is like learning curve, like it's kind of new to
It's all good
everybody, right?
information.
So it's all learning curve right
Right.
now.
It's all good input.
Right, and that was one of my questions is, does this fall under a home business?
That's
Does
how-
it go,
what is
does
it?
it go through an application process
Who's it?
through the planning board?
And
You know?
with High Point, can you guys do an association or is it too late?
We have an
We have it.
association and we have established covenants, but within the covenants, like I said, there's a statement saying this is only the association and the residents here will be single family use only. Now, the verbiage there that most people with common sense would say, okay, so you can't run a business out of that location. But if it went to litigation, which is very possible if you have a major real estate investor like I have as a neighbor that lives in Florida, and that's his business, VRBO, and
And you can't amend those regulations as a board? Do you have a board? that
Actually, I
amend
can-
those?
yes,
Oh, yeah, we
we,
can.
I can put you in contact with someone who lives here in town, who lived in a neighborhood where they did amend the covenants.
okay. And
And
can you
restrict
amend
that.
without a lawyer? Can you do it within the board?
I,
You should be able to, it should, as long as you have bylaws, you should be able to do it. You don't need an attorney for bylaws.
No, you don't.
No, but we're concerned about liability.
absolutely.
Yes, sure.
I would
Yeah.
definitely discuss it as a board and
Definitely.
decide about it, and you could speak to an attorney, but you should be able to change those.
We
within
have
your-
spoken to
Yeah.
attorneys,
Mhm.
yeah, and they've
Was their
advised
thought?
us not to touch it
Because of the liability.
because of the liability.
Really?
Two attorneys, two real estate attorneys.
told you not to
advised
touch
us As a homeowners association, not to amend our covenants at this point, or suggested that we not do that
Mhm.
because of potential liability, or maybe the.
And we
office.
violated their rights.
Because he
Okay.
bought it as an investment and now you're.
Yeah, so it would
His
look like
sole
you're
purpose of
targeting
buying
that
it,
one
So we're
individual.
trying to.
Yep.
And we
Right.
don't, and that's not what we're trying to do.
Right.
You know, we just want to try
Some
to.
sort of regulation.
Yeah, do what's fair and what we think is right, and certainly it's a little bit of a bug for us.
Well, I would
And it's-
think, in my mind, that that's not an area that I would ever think would be an area.
But it is.
area.
But obviously, it's a very, but it's the
I would
opposite.
think the association all day long. is
Would have said no.
Every other.
The
every
the
third
verbiage
house,
isn't there
but-
though, and according to two
Right.
attorneys we contacted,
Yeah.
they said, yeah, he's probably going to.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is most people that buy in your neighborhood, I'm sure are not thinking that. It's either your second home or it's your long-term home and you're not really
Right.
thinking about it in those terms.
Right.
Correct.
Whereas a lot of people that buy, like up in the association or up on the mountain or maybe, down in the bay, a little cottage, they're thinking, oh, I'm gonna, I wouldn't, I'm surprised.
There's a nice view there, and he's asking 450 to 500 a night. And, the issue being is, we don't know who's coming in and out of the neighborhood, it depreciates that property. Are they gonna respect the property, on and on. It's a single family development. And is this considered a business?
$450 a night, they're definitely more than a family.
Yeah, that's not a,
That's
that's
a
not a
lot.
single
Yeah.
family.
That-
In my opinion, it's
No,
not a
that's,
single
that's
family
two
use.
that's
Yeah.
two families.
Well, when Mr. O'Brien said like 4,700
That's
earlier,
what
I'm thinking
encourages that.
you pay that because you have multiple people staying there flipping
this
the
is-
bill.
this is the
That's
thing.
how you do
Exactly.
that.
That's how they do it.
You know.
Instead of just charging so much per night for the
Yeah,
building,
they get big
they're
bucks
charging
and
so
then
much per
people
person.
all go up there together. I mean,
That's
and
the
that's
problem.
great if I want to go away with the whole family and you get a place that is actually okay to do that.
This is year round too, as you saw.
Oh, yeah.
This is dead of winter.
Yeah.
It's
that's-
one thing if I had to deal with it for the summer,
Mhm.
but John, I think you hit it on the head when you said the budding neighbors should be notified of what these people's intentions are.
That's doing,
Yeah,
all the
Paul, I mean-
abutters should be notified.
Yeah,
And
Paul, I
that would
went
be a
out
part
there.
of it.
Yeah, and I greeted the guy and I said, you need anything, stop by and blah, blah, blah. And he, he told me, oh, yeah, this is great. My father and I, and I'm thinking that the father owns a house here, the son's gonna buy a house here. I said, you need anything, just stop and see me. Need any tools? It was like, forget it, buddy.
And the association was never notified of his intent either.
That's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So,
No, John, you're right with that.
So this is in Laconia's permit application,
Yeah, we
and it says right
have one.
here, the date that the abutters notices were mailed.
Right.
Mhm.
So that's just them covering themselves on that.
Yeah. And you mentioned liability. That's also, our view is we want to make sure that we do this
As a
to
town.
minimize our liability.
Right.
Because I was taught by several very senior building inspectors when I started doing this, that every decision I make, I have to make as if I'm going to have to defend it in court. Because the chance is that I will. I fortunately have not had to, but that potential is there.
Right.
And so that's another part of this. We want to make sure that we've base this on legal ground. Part of the reason we're looking to other towns that have these things and have fought those battles, Laconia, Portsmouth, you know, they've set the precedent and that's been established so that we can sort of safely follow their wake, if you will, you know, and use that, but tailor it more, you know, to our community.
I don't know if this will help or not, but to control the VRBOs and the short-term rentals, I think other communities have made it a law that the owner has to be a resident of the state. And, you know, where that would exclude these people from, say, Florida, coming up and buying you know, several properties and not even coming here and just renting them out continuously.
That's a good point.
You had a question?
I just want to say, like, I agree with all of you, and I feel terrible for any of you that have neighbors that are bad Airbnb. But there's an underground for this. If you don't Airbnb and VRBO, they can rent it on Facebook, they can rent it.
Of course.
I'm just saying, like, this is a good, this platform, for me, I wouldn't do it at all. I only rent to families and couples, like, I don't do big groups. But I wouldn't do it at all if I didn't have the security of Airbnb. I had to up my insurance. I had to, you know, we changed a lot to put ourselves in a position to do this, just minimally. And some of the things I hear are like, it's kind of invasive on people's personal property rights, because I don't get to pick who comes to your house on the weekend. I don't, you know, you could lose your job tomorrow and you might need to do this in order to, like,
And you have a good point.
do whatever. And I just think that, like, you know, you can have bad neighbors. It's a lot of this is just.
Of course you can.
It's lumped into, like, you know, it's the 80-20 rule. I think 80% of us are responsible. I want to be part of this community. I'm invested in this community. I have no interest in having someone come in to crash my house. Like, it's scary for us to do this. You know, a lot of us aren't doing this because it's like, you know, Yahoo, we're just making a ton of money. It's like, you know, we have to do this in order to support our second home, the second homes that we own, and so that we can retire in this community and be part of this community. So I get nervous when people start saying, like, oh, the parking. Well, you know what? Long before Airbnb, people are probably parking, like, in the wrong spots. There's limited parking in all of the houses. Every weekend here in the summer, our neighbors' houses are full of people. I love it. It's what the Bay should be like. I mean, it's fun. It's fun. Now, I don't rent my house like that. I'm just saying, like, you know.
I really think it's more for just
Yeah.
bad apples. It's
Right.
really
It's
just
the
the
bad
apples.
apples
The
to
bad
weed out.
apples.
Right, and Airbnb, I would say, for those of us that travel and do, families are doing it now. I mean, we've had people that have come here to look at properties, we've had come here to give their kids an escape to, like, study in a different place outside of their tiny apartments in Boston. There are good people renting Airbnb. I just want, and.
I rent an Airbnb. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
No, there isn't.
Like, there's nothing wrong with it.
It has
It
to
just
be
has to be somewhat
just
regulated.
done
because-
regularly and taken care of and have respect for everyone.
So when you talk about a butter approval, I guess I just get a little bit. concerned.
Not approval, notification.
No notification.
So that the butters know what's going on.
Yeah, it would
Just
be
a
the same if
notification.
you were coming into the zoning board for something to do. You know, your abutters are notified and
Just
they have an
notified.
opportunity to make an input. You know, and that's it. If they don't like it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to happen. Because I know at the zoning board, they've got to come up with facts and
That's
base it
correct.
on facts. So that type of thing, Paul sits on the zoning board, so. But, you know, up in the woods at Coffin Brook, not such a big deal, but when you're, you know, kind of crammed together down in the Bay, yeah, I mean, courtesy, let your neighbors I mean,
Oh.
there's know. A River Lake
I
Street
live
in
in
behind the Chinese
And
restaurant.
close
Out at the very end, it's a dead end.
We have to.
And there's a small neighborhood there. And there is a duplex in there that is rented as an Airbnb. And being a duplex back in the woods, it's not expensive. And I've talked to I've had the same guy come to me several years now. I see, he's like, are we gonna do something? You know, what can we do? What can be done? So in that case, their neighborhood there's 6 or 7 houses there and one of them is rented all the time, over and over and over.
Well, there's a lot of businesses that are opening up like wedding venues and whatnot and offering wedding services. So I'm seeing a lot of people that, and I want no part, I don't, if they say the word wedding, it's not gonna happen at my house because it could be, the wedding could be at my house for all I know, like, I'm very cautious about it.
Right.
But there's no hotels in town. So people are looking for places to,
Makes a
you know,
Yes.
we're building these businesses, but we don't have the infrastructure to support them. And this is kind of it's not a good fit for me, but I mean, for couples that want to just come and stay for the weekend for weddings, I mean, that is a lot of it. I guess I'm just speaking to the other side of it because it is just a lot of nice families, people looking for houses, people coming up to experience it. And the feedback has been phenomenal. It's like we're blessed to be able to have this opportunity, to have this property here, and I'm happy to share it. And we've had a lot of positive, like, you know, it balances someone sleeping in your bed. So you know what I mean? Like you get nice feedback. from
And I
people
just, so
that
I
experience.
I just hosted a wedding this weekend at my home and, you know, our guests had to travel all over the place to find somewhere to sleep, which was a shame.
Right.
Yeah, because we've had people stay at our property who originally were from Mass, now live in North Carolina. We're up here at Gunstock for a wedding. And so they stayed. We've got people Labor Day weekend coming from Minnesota for a wedding in Gilmanton. Gilmanton. So she's like, how close are you? And I go, oh, super close. Just coffee room.
Next town over, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I mean, and I'll be honest, I mean, because we lived in a town of 144,000 people and we lived to, you know, 5,000 people here, whatever it is. So I actually feel kind of good because he works at the pavilion too. So sometimes when there's people in our apartment, it feels kind of like, okay, there's someone else here. So I'm not a total paranoid freak because, you know, I make sure everything's double locked and what are they gonna take? My dogs, my cat, I don't know, but you know, you just and it's nice, like the people that are there today, they're from New Jersey, they've got their bicycles that are sitting under the stairs. I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. They're, you know, they're comfortable leaving their stuff out, but.
The point is, your people live here.
Yeah.
We're
do.
talking about people that don't live here. We're talking about people that come up here and use and abuse.
And that's,
I mean, he's getting $5,000 for the house next door. You really think he cares when that place gets destroyed?
I really
That place is
think
a
I
mess.
think that this discussion
You
was
better
really
care.
good. I would
Good point.
tip off.
You gotta care.
I agree.
It's gonna cost them a lot to fix it. and he
Well,
won't do
you
it.
know, that fire escape on the side of that house, Jim put that up. I wouldn't let my dog come down that thing.
I think that this discussion was a really good starting point. I was glad that, even though some of us might have different views, it's amazing how you can have a different view, but it's still, you know, it's good to see the other side. And I think it's good for the town that they got our perspective. And I think the town does not want to overregulate it, just regulate it to some point that they can enforce something,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Deal
Have
with-
some
deal
sort
with-
of,
We can deal with the situations like
like that.
Yes,
How are you gonna enforce any of this stuff? No, I have a boathouse down there. I have it legally posted. I made sure, went through, found out what the state law was for posting, and I did that. And I took photographs down to the police station and they said, well, what do you want me to do? Arrest those kids? I said, no, maybe talk to their parents, you know? Well, work it out with the owner. You know, he doesn't care.
no, he doesn't.
Are
what do you
they, are
do?
they
They're
damaging the
trespassing.
property?
They're
Are
trespassing.
they trespassing?
Oh, yeah.
They're constantly trespassing. Are they
Right.
doing any damage or anything or
No.
just trespassing?
Trespassing.
And the police department won't do anything about that?
Yeah.
Well, he didn't do anything about the tree that she cut down. You know.
Oh.
So how do you, I mean, they're in the boathouse and they go running down the side of the boathouse and dive in the water. What happens if they get hurt?
And it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
If they get hurt.
Yeah, it's the owners.
Yeah,
Well, this is the
That's
problem.
it's kind of falls in the category of owning a swimming pool.
exactly.
Yeah,
Put a fence around it so they can't get to it. That's what. it was
that's,
a reg-
the- well, that's.
It's, you know, that's,
exactly-
you know, you think about something like that. Unfortunately, people are wandering into your yard. You can just scoot them out. But when it came to the point with insurance, when you own an in-ground swimming pool or a swimming pool, you had to put some sort of fence around it. So somebody doesn't wander in your yard.
He's got a lock on
Follow the pool.
he's got a lock on the entrance and they take it off. You know?
That's, I would hope that if they're, that is a trespass issue.
It is.
Yeah,
And
that's more than just wandering
Yeah,
onto
that's more than
somebody's
just wandering.
property. That's
Well, the problem with is that I deal with one group of people, then another group of people, and I have to deal with it again. I'm
Right.
getting damn sick and tired of dealing with
agree.
this crap.
I can understand.
Shouldn't have to.
So
No.
I built a place up here because, number one, I realized I was in a commercial residential zone. Right next to me where this place is a residential zone, which he's running a business. It's strictly a business. There's no way you can cut it. It's a business.
Right.
Guy doesn't live there. It's a business. He pays state tax on the business that he does. Okay, and we have the Christian Conference Center down here, pretty quiet group of people. I kind of figured they'd probably keep the bay in check a little bit, you know, and I think they do with the way they operate. And the people next door to us, I was aware that that was residential commercial zone in there. I was aware that they had a bunch of cabins that they rented out. And we have absolutely never had a problem. I mean, never had a problem with people over there. But the owners are right there. They're
That's right.
present.
On-site management.
They can take care of it.
And anything that, any time they see trouble brewing, they squelch it before I even know there was a problem.
Mhm.
It's just, you know, my quality of life suffers because of what's next door to me.
And he's making a fortune.
And why should the money has nothing to do with it. It's my quality of life is what I'm
Right.
concerned about. You know, I'm getting old. I don't have that many more years. I would like to enjoy them, and I enjoy Alton Bay.
And you should have that expectation. You should be able to
Should.
fulfill that expectation that, you know, okay, you have invested in your property and you live here in your neighborhood. And to have someone just come in and then, you know, crowds running in and out constantly, you know, so that's, again, it's a balance to strike, but I know that it's gonna fall to my office. The majority, a lot of this will end up falling to this office, but it's something that's necessary. I think, you know, we've been having this conversation for several years, you know, but it's just a matter of.
I got one more comment. It's not really my problem. It's these guys' problem over here. They said the guy's building bedrooms in the basement of the house.
He's proposed, he's talked about, he
The
hasn't done it.
building permit's an issue to do that.
No, but if he hasn't actually gone forward and if he's building it, the other part of that is if he comes in and wants to increase the number of bedrooms in the house, if the septic system is not sized for that, then
That's
he
what I'm
has to
getting at.
design a new septic system. He has to, you know, that has to be in place. It's not just come in and get a building permit, finish off the bedrooms.
But there's another comment I have. State law says, you know, if you're living on the lake, and I don't know how far back from the water you have to be, but when you sell your property, the seller has to provide a septic inspection by a licensed septic
Yes.
person. And that has to be transferred when they close the deal.
Right. That's a site assessment. that is done.
However, there's no teeth to this. You know, somebody can buy this house knowing that the thing has failed and nobody does anything about it because the copies of these don't go to the state and I doubt that they go to
They
the
do.
town.
The site assessments, matter of fact, I'm struggling to get a hold of them because they go directly to DES, to subsurface. And they look at it. If the system has failed, then they're required to replace it. But if they don't know that it's failed or they
And the
abuse
state
it.
does not mess around with,
What's that?
the state does not mess around with their septic issues. They,
Well, I guess what I read on it, maybe I misread it because it indicated that it had to be transferred with the title of the property, but beyond that, nothing.
No, that goes back to DES. So
And what do they do about it?
well, if it's identified as a failed system, then it has to be replaced. There's no getting around it. The
Who
system's
enforces
failed.
that?
Pardon?
Who enforces that?
If I find out about it first, I do. If they find out about it, they'll notify me. And then we work together on enforcing it. But it's a failed system is a failed system. And
You haven't been notified of a failed system up there.
where?
The property.
Oh,
we're
the
talking
proper time
about.
out? No, not yet.
Yeah.
I'm sure I will be. If you start to smell it, then I'll know about it. And when it comes to septic systems on the lake, I have a saying, I'm pretty particular about it and then have stuck by the state rules where a lot of people don't regarding having new designs or new systems put in or whatever. And, one of the things I say is it may be blue, but it's the golden goose. The lake is what draws people
Oh, of
here,
course,
though
of
all of
course.
the lakes, not just this one, but,
All the lakes.
we have several lakes here in Alton, but all the lakes in the area. And to maintain, it's important to do our best to maintain the water quality.
John, who does the testing of it, of the water? Because I tried to get it tested and there's no one that's going to do the testing of the water in the bay.
We tested, well, up until last year, the state would test the beaches. They test the swim dock and the beach, and it'd be once a month during the summer. And then if it failed, they were back and we would post. We have not, but this year they're not doing it again. So that would be, if we feel there's a problem, or it looks like there may be a problem, we will do the testing ourselves. The water department will help, has already offered to help me.
Oh, my tomatoes grow good over there.
So what I'm going to do for tonight is I'm going to prepare a list of all of your concerns, comments, things we talked about, and share that at our next committee meeting with all of the remaining committee members that weren't able to make it tonight. And then we'll discuss it with them a little further and start crafting an actual ordinance. Our next meeting is September 14th.
And I want to stress that that ordinance is up to you, whether it passes or
Right.
fails, because it can our zoning ordinance can all be modified by town vote. And that's why we propose changes each year to our zoning ordinance to try to keep up with things.
And that being said, I think it's really important to understand the ordinance that is put forth, and you understand the terminology, so that way take your neighbor into consideration when voting. You need, like, a lot of people vote and they just vote to vote. You need to understand what you're voting on. I think that for anything that you're voting on. And I'm sure that the town is going to do it in a way that is best for everybody, but, this isn't time to just, beat down your neighbor either.
No,
And a rationale
Yeah.
that
As
explains.
part of the process, there are public hearings that are held on these zoning ordinance, these amendments and these changes and stuff. By law, there have to be public hearings, and they're normally we finish up in January, so they can go to the vote in March. The other part of this is as we do get farther into this, those of you that are here, we're going to need you to explain it to the people out there. Because there are people who will put a tremendous amount of misinformation out. We've fought one battle for the last 3 years to try to get it changed. And it's a very simple change, but we have people putting on Facebook that it's this, that. The definition of a lumber yard is a place where you go buy building supplies in our ordinance. Well, they're not allowed in our residential commercial zone. So Rubens is not allowed. If he wanted to move in there and do it today, he can't do it because of the ordinance. So we've tried for 3 years to get changed so they'd be allowed in that zone. And we have people saying, oh, they're going to put in a lumber mill, they're going to be milling lumber, this, that. So, and it's based on it's failed because of the misinformation that people, we've tried our best to put out the right information, but it's much easier for us if we have people who are in the know about what's going on. And then when someone
Help
says,
explain.
oh, well, they're just trying to cut off business, or no, they're not. Here's what we sat there and discussed it with people.
And
this is what it is.
generally, when you guys finish up in January, everything is discussed at the deliberative session. That's
The
what it's
zoning
called.
amendments are not.
aren't.
Oh, I thought they were held
No,
at the
they're
first
not.
one.
No, we have hearings with the planning board,
Right.
and that's
Oh,
where they're
I
discussed.
thought, because I thought last year, I know I went to the second, I missed the first, and I thought that's what it was.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
the
at deliberative,
is
it's just
money
warrant
articles.
articles. Yeah, they have to do it
Okay.
money.
It's all money articles, yes.
Yep.
But, so we're going to ask for your help too.
That's what this group does. It does the amendments of each article that was in question or failed to better explain each and every one of them. And with your help, to explain, especially talking about short-term rentals, and all that input will help in order to draft it and properly put it out there to everyone. And then you people vote on it.
And when we look at these amendments, we're doing what Kelly said. We're trying to look ahead You know, some of these things were changing, were written in 1970 when the ordinance was written. And today they have no application because they're from 1970 or 1981 or whatever. This driveway.
This particular topic that we're discussing today, though, involves the majority of the people that are exercising Airbnb are people that have second homes.
Yeah.
And you don't get to vote
here with his family.
if you're, unless you're an alternate resident. So 80% of the people that are subject to this topic that we're discussing don't vote the right.
It's not, that number is not 80%, although it's substantial, okay? But 80%.
All of,
That sounds a
all of
little
the
high.
second homeowners aren't necessarily renting their homes out. I mean, I don't even
No.
know that there's half of this second homeowners.
I don't think so.
No, but I'm saying for this particular part, I would assume that the majority of people that are renting them are people that have second homes.
And then I think it would be more important to
So no,
speak to your neighbors and just to have them understand what they're voting on and how important it is to you and that you're responsible, you know, host and hostess and, you know, like, and just to understand. This is what's gonna be coming up, you know, and it's important to me that you understand this is what it is, and, you know, I mean, I think that would be.
Okay. Ron, what's the voting process? How's that go about?
Well, it's when in March, when you vote on the budget, you go to the polls and vote on the budget, you vote on the amendments at the same time.
It's all
It's
together,
all on the warrant.
which you
And
vote
and
for.
when are they discussed again? Before the deliberative?
The planning board hearings start in December. And then they roll, generally, we have to have a minimum of 2 hearings. And if there's questions, we schedule extra hearings, but there has to be a minimum of 2 hearings for zoning amendments, 2 public, advertised public hearings.
So not to be Debbie Downer here, I voted in my first election hearing as a registered voter. And I work at Prospect Mountain High School also. So I am an invested member of this community. And I was told by people that the good old boys, excuse me, of Alton don't necessarily like to come out and vote because they like everything the way it is.
Okay, I would like to
Have you
speak
ever-
directly to that.
Have
okay?
you ever heard that? I was like, I don't know.
I'm just gonna speak directly to that. This is my wheelhouse right here, okay? So I have been here for the very, very short time of 17 years. In Alton, that is like minute to the Good Old Boys Club that you so speak of. I'm here because I am a volunteer citizen on the Master Plan Committee. And that's to help guide the town over the course of the next 10 years. And it's important as a community to come out and speak, whether it's important to you or not, but also that's why I kept stressing about your neighbors, right? It's important to not have tunnel vision and just see your point. We are a community. When my family moved here, it was my family, we have a family-based business, and Alton is an extension of that family. Actively involved on a number of committees and different things. And the Good Old Boys Club can be loud. But that's all the more reason why you should be educated and participating and voting. It is exactly why. It's exactly why I was with the community profile 2 years ago. It was a completely volunteer-led base. It took 2 years of that. The Master Plan Committee, it's important to come out and to support your community. And I'm not saying you have to come out every week and be so active and whatever, but it is important to be vested, not just float along. It's important to be educated on what you're voting on in March. You know, and everybody, the Good Old Boys Club can be loud, but you just need to just do your due diligence, I guess I would say. Don't let them affect you and what you're doing, I guess.
Well, thank you for my raise at Prospect Mountain High School, all of you that voted, just so you know.
And what is, and I'll say this about that, there are people who have been here a long time who don't want anything to change.
That's what I'm saying.
But
But-
that is not a realistic view of life. Things are going to
There are a
change
lot
whether
of-
we want them to not.
I mean,
Do we want to be involved in
And
that
that's
change?
exactly it, whether we want change or not, it happens.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to get involved.
Because I like Alton. I love this community. It was a great place to bring my kids and raise my kids. And I moved here for that reason. I don't want to live in a city. I don't want to live in, you know, I like it the way it is, but I also realize that it will grow because progress happens. how do you?
Progress is gonna happen, no
How
matter
do
what.
you try to shift that and manage it to the way that best suits your community and your town? And the best way to do that is to be active. And
Get
to
on the
talk to your
master plan
neighbors.
committee.
Right.
Neighbors, or like to talk to your coworkers. And really, that's the best thing you can do.
Talking to a 4-time PTA
Thank
president.
you.
So.
I was that too.
You're preaching to the choir here. So,
Yep.
yes, I would love to somehow get involved because I don't want our little business to go away because I got to put a kid through college and.
No, that's-
North
I don't think
Carolina.
you, I don't think there's any threat of your business going away.
Of my business?
But I wanted,
No.
I mentioned that I lived on
Manage
Meredith.
it well.
I mentioned that I lived in Meredith. It's where I grew up. That's my home. My family's there and everything else. And the Meredith from when I was 10 years old to the Meredith of now is two entirely very, very different things. But one of the things is it's still a community. And that came from a lot of work in the 70s up through of looking ahead and trying to visualize. I mean, where the Mill Falls parking lot is now was an asbestos mill. And I used to deliver newspapers in that asbestos mill when I was 10 years old. And the kids whose parents worked there used to play in the big fluff clouds of asbestos. Beautiful. It's gone. We had a conversation, but it took a lot of intelligent thought, and people who were actually had the vision to look out 20 years or whatever, to try to see, how it could grow but not be.
I also think
down.
for a smaller town, it's hard because you only have so many people that will be active. And especially nowadays, I think in society, we have a very me first society. Everybody's worried about themselves first before anybody else. And you really can't have a community with that type of vision, right? Because community is not me, it's we, right? So if you are not active and the same people keep running, the good old boys club, if that's how we want to say how it works, well, then you need to do, and whether that is you or your neighbor or your coworker or somebody you talk to, it really is about being an active participant in your community.
I've got vested interest in this community for many years. That's why I ran for selectman. Came into this town with my business, got involved with the Alton Bay Airport, got involved with that, brought that from ground zero, from the good old boys, like you would say, and brought that up, got the state more involved, got more involvement with people and groups and going on Facebook, getting involved with the FAA and the state. It's just, there are people that just don't want change, but they haven't accepted the fact or come to grips with the idea things are going to change no matter what. The town is growing, people are growing. We're just a community that's going to have to change and accept it. And it's how we do it and how we accept it and how we work with everybody. We work together is how we do it.
It's really about working together so we can have the quote unquote good old boys club, but it's really about listening to everybody. That's why I'm like a broken record when I say it though, because we are all in this together, right? So we are neighbors. I'm up and down the mountain all the time. We're all here from different walks of life, but we are all here because we all live in Alton and this is our community that we are concerned about and we care for. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just really staying active and caring about your community.
I think a very important part though of this discussion that's kind of what this has evolved into is educating the town and the good old boys, whatever you want to call them. Yeah, there's some long timers here, but I've also seen in my very short time here, some attitudes changing.
Yes.
Some minds being open.
Absolutely.
And that's what we
That's
need
my
to do.
point.
And sometimes it takes a long time.
It does.
But
It'll change.
So Jessica here, so we sit on a couple of committees together. I say this all the time. I love a roundtable discussion because I can come in with what I think is an opinion or a view. But when I listen to somebody else, it makes me think about it in a different light and helps me see it from a different perspective. I'm open-minded like that. And I really just came because I don't necessarily have a rental per se. But I just was interested. So
that being said, is there any opportunity for folks that aren't full-time residents? Like we spend 50% of our time here and we're vested in the community and we're long-term partners in the community, but I can't sit on a committee and I can't vote. is there any opportunity for me to like get more involved?
Well, there are a lot of actual,
Change your
there's a lot
residence.
of grassroots committees that you could be involved in if you want to be involved in the community. I don't know, like town government wise, what the ruling is on that. I'm not a town
Full year residence.
employee.
I'm sure there's plenty of opportunities to get involved.
But
There is, there is.
I'm vice president of the Alton Business Association. I served on the Old Home Week Committee. I've served on a number of different committees that are all just volunteer grassroots organizations that provide a lot of things in the town for the town that are not town government based at all.
And just because you are not allowed, for whatever reason, to be a member of like this committee, there's nothing that says, like, we would love to have people come on a regular
Absolutely.
basis, and then they're that much more educated. A lot of times we have these meetings and we're talking to ourselves. There's no one around.
Good to have the extra
Yes.
input and everybody. can-
Yeah,
And then they say-
I can't
then-
tell you
then
how
someone
valuable
makes
this
a
is. I
comment
mean,
about,
this
"Oh,
is
well, they just
incredible.
discussed it, did it?"
Right.
Well, we
Very,
didn't
very
discuss
helpful.
it.
Yeah.
Right, and I thank each and every one of you for taking the time tonight to come. This is actually the biggest group I think we've had ever at a committee. So I really, and I'm not just saying that, like, I thank you for your
Usually
time.
only had one, maybe two.
Yeah, and I think
That's
we
it.
accomplished more, or at least learned more this evening than
Yeah.
certainly
Thank you
of
all.
last year's SAC meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your input.
Allowing us to have a voice.
That's part of the process. That's the way it should be.
Thank you.
Kelly, you did a great job here.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. So September 14th is our next meeting, if you want to attend another one.
Thank you. Thanks for the input.